welcome to the pelvic floor section. I'm so excited to have you here. The pelvic floor is by far one of my favorite parts of the human body. I think it's just really cool. So I didn't always focus on the pelvic floor. Back in 2005, I graduated from PT school with my master's, and that was after being a personal trainer for a very long time. I just really always enjoyed exercise and making the body stronger. And so I got out in 2005 and worked for a little bit, and then they offered this transitional doctorate program, and I thought, you know what, that sounds pretty cool. I think I'm going to go back and get my doctorate. So we had to do a project, a doctorate research project. So I did my project on the SI joint because I thought, you know what, this is a really intriguing part of the body. And it just felt like it was something that I didn't get a chance to dive into quite enough in PT school and wanted to learn more. So I spent that year working on my project for the SI joint and looking up all the research and all that good stuff. So the pelvis has always been an area that's fascinated me. But to be honest, I didn't fully dive into the pelvic floor itself until I had kids and I had issues. So after my first kid, I had some pelvic floor issues. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Because the traditional, what we would think about the traditional, and there are some highly trained, very good pelvic floor PTs out there, but when we think about the traditional approach to treating the pelvic floor, doing more Kegels, working on strengthening the pelvic floor, wasn't working for me. And so that made me scratch my head a little bit and say, you know what? I've been at this ortho PT gig for a long time now, and I've been a trainer for a long time, and I should be able to figure this out. So I put on my thinking, digging deeper, exploratory cap and went down all these avenues. From the myofascial trains, where we're looking at how the body is connected, all the way from foot strength to hip strength to what's going on in the thorax, and how the diaphragm functions with the pelvic floor. So there's this crazy chain on the rest of the body and how it plays into what's happening to the pelvic floor, and that is so cool. And so what I found, if you want to not only help somebody having pelvic floor issues, but if you want to optimize function, thinking about heading into menopause, like that's no joke. All right, so being as strong as we possibly can going into menopause is a good thing. So whether you're a physical therapist or somebody working in fitness in some realm, then understanding how the pelvic floor works with the rest of the body, I feel like is really important if you're working on helping people get stronger. Okay, so in this pelvic floor section, we're going to be diving in a little bit to how the pelvic floor itself works, because I think you have to understand that basis first. And then we're going to be looking a little bit at the kinetic chain and how everything else plays into the pelvic floor. So hopefully it will be fun and exciting. Let's dive into the pelvic floor now and talk a little bit about function. So just keep in mind the pelvic floor can be a little bit complicated if it's not something that you've spent a lot of time thinking about before. So one thing that we're going to do is a quick review of muscles, what they do, and then some issues that I see that stem off of that. And then we're going to move into what I consider to be the most fun part, which is when you dig about 5 layers in and when you go past the recommendation of just Kegels, okay? So this is going to be the kinetic chain, and this is where it can get a little bit spicy as far as like, all right, that was a little complicated, but I'm going to do my best to make it as simple as possible. But just know if you're a little bit lost, in the main PCS course, I'll have everything simplified. All right, we'll have lots of anatomy reviews, we'll have lots of function reviews, so everything will make a little bit more sense because it won't be quite as quick and condensed. Okay, so let's take a look at the pelvic floor. Such a great set of muscles. All right, so when we think about the function of the pelvic floor, we have several primary functions. All right, so among those is supporting our pelvic organs. So it's a sling of muscles and helps to lift and support our pelvic organs. Now, we also have, within the sling of muscles, we have a front triangle and a back triangle that is more of the superficial. So like if you were gonna touch right on the edge, that would be more of the superficial muscles. These are the ones that help to stop pee and poop and gas. All right, now when we think about contracting these muscles, what will often happen, especially with those women that leak when jumping rope, coughing, sneezing, laughing, and such, they will do a Kegel with just the back, okay? Or with primarily the back. And they're like, I'm lifting, I'm tightening my pelvic floor. And then when we dig a little deeper, we find, oh, they weren't really recruiting the front of their pelvic floor, which is something all those Kegel trainers online And you know what I'm talking about, the ones where you can buy the little things, connect it with your phone, do the little video games. They can't tell you that. They can't tell you whether or not you're contracting the front or the back of your pelvic floor. Okay, so I want you to take a second right now, if you're in a nice, quiet space, and I want you to do a Kegel for me. I want you to think about contracting your pelvic floor. And what I want you to do is focus on feeling the front of your pelvic floor, so pubic bone, front of your pelvic floor. See if you can feel the front of your pelvic floor. And it's going to kind of feel like the front nods under. Okay, so see if you can try that for me right now. Can you connect with the front of your pelvic floor? See if you can initiate the contraction from the front. So you don't get, the back is obviously going to want to kick in as well with this, but you don't want this giant squeeze of the back and then the front going, oh, let me try to catch up a little bit. All right, so what do you think? Did you get it? Can you get the front of your pelvic floor to contract and kind of lead the way? So I find this is really, really, really important for those women that leak. And we'll talk a lot later about relaxing and tightness and all that good stuff, because that's going to dive down a lot more rabbit holes. But what I want you to realize is that you can contract the front or the back of your pelvic floor, and one can contract more than the other. So it's often this weakness or tightness on one side where you're like, oh, I've got, I really feel my pelvic floor contracting and I've been doing my Kegels, but you might still be experiencing some leaks because the front is not doing as much as it should. And then I see a lot of issues with tightness in the back of the pelvic floor, some tightness in the front. And this can be the ladies that are like, oh, I feel like I have a UTI, but I go in and my bacterial culture is negative, so I don't really have a UTI, but I'm not sure what's going on. They have some front pelvic floor tightness. All right, but back pelvic floor tightness can be way more common and just really, really annoying because you tend to get that deep butt pain on road trips. It hurts when you sit on your tailbone, like if you sit back on your tailbone. So I tend to see this a lot from people doing yoga or Pilates where they're rolling backwards and they're like, oh, it just really hurts to sit on my tailbone. So you can have some of that deep butt pain. And I often find this will go hand in hand with the glutes not wanting to show up quite like they should. So I typically don't see great glute strength on someone with tight pelvic floors in the back. And I think this is not a coincidence. It goes hand in hand with muscle function, all right? And you get that like chicken and egg where your glutes don't want to show up because your deep hip rotators in the back, like your obturator and your piriformis, are all showing up first. And so then the glutes are like, well, why should I work? The deep hip rotators are already showing up. And so, but if somebody has great glutes, then their deep hip rotators don't feel like they need to do quite as much work. So then the back of their pelvic floor releases. So it's this chicken and egg where how do you break the cycle? And you break it through exercise. You break it through working on strengthening the right way, which is fun and exciting, and I love it. All right, so let's keep going deeper, all puns intended, on the pelvic floor. So you have the surface muscles, and then as we go deeper, we have the muscles that support the pelvic organs. So those are going to be the ones that lift. So I want you to try that with me right now. I want you to try the squeeze. So think about, let's take this in layers, very, very slowly. And I want you to think about squeezing your pelvic floor shut in the front, shut in the back, and then I want you to think about it is now attached to one of the little claws. You know the little claws in the games that kids like to play where the claw comes down, you push the button, and then it grabs, and then it picks back up. So I want you to pretend your pelvic floor is this nice little claw. I want you to give me a nice inhale. Inhale down, remember our breathing. Inhale down, feel that inhale expand into the sides of your pelvic floor. So we're releasing, and into the back because we want that claw to open evenly. So as you come down, inhale, claw opens, pelvic floor expands a little bit. Exhale, grab with the claw. So you're gonna pinch, and then you're gonna lift. So see if you can feel that squeeze and lift. See if you can feel it come in equally from the front, equally from the back. And what we don't want to feel is our outside deep hip rotators. All right, so if you will, find your sits bones for me. So you can sit however you're comfortable. Find your sits bones for me. All right, so these are those ischial tuberosities. All right, so you're sitting on your ischial tuberosities. All right, I want you to find those ischial tuberosities for me. And then I want you to go right to the outside of those ischial tuberosities. So right here in the fleshy part that is between the hip bone, the greater trochanter, and the ischial tuberosity. So you're in this fleshy part right here. And then I want you to lift your pelvic floor. Did you get any tightening from outside your ischial tuberosity? So did you get any outside tightening in those deep hip rotators, in your glutes? And you can try this in different positions. And what you may find is that you tend to try to kick everything in. So when you tighten your pelvic floor, you might also kick in your piriformis, and that wants to be helpful, and that is part of what's causing the deep hip rotator tightness or the pelvic floor tightness that it has become kind of a chronic thing. All right, so what we have to look at is just the kind of breakdown of a contraction, which is fun and exciting, but then we have to apply it. All right, so kind of once you master front and back, we're gonna also look at abdominal control. All right, so when you think about contracting the pelvic floor leads the way. The pelvic floor initiates the contraction. So it's the first to fire because the pelvic floor is also a primary spinal stabilizer. So think about this giant sling of muscles down here. What is it attaching to? The spine, right? So we've got this primary spinal stabilizer. And so when we think about contracting, we think about the pelvic floor leads the way. It's going to fire first. And then we get about 30% or so of just pure pelvic floor. And then as we start to go into that lift, we're going to start to get abs. So those lower abs are connected with the pelvic floor. So our TAs are actually in segments. Didn't used to think that. Got an anatomy study for you. So the TA are actually in segments, lower, middle, and upper. So we think about those lower TAs contracting. We're going to be contracting them with the pelvic floor. So lower TAs, internal obliques, with the pelvic floor from after that first 30%. And then it's going to be a lot of abs to get the last bit of pelvic floor strength, which is really cool to think about when we think about that kinetic chain and getting everything stronger. So let's talk a little bit about how the abs play a role with leaking. So that's also part of what I often see is that women who tend to leak, which is really probably the most common pelvic floor issue that we see, is women who tend to leak don't have enough lower abdominal strength, and so they'll often have that little lower belly pooch. So that's one of the things we're going to really work on in this course is getting rid of that lower belly pooch. So a lot of women have that lower belly pooch, and they also tend to be upper ab grippers. So they will hold tension underneath their upper abs. So this is your challenge. I want you to go throughout your day, and I want you to place your hands right underneath your cage, and I want you to feel for it to be soft and squishy. And that doesn't mean I'm asking you to let it all hang out, super slouchy posture and all that stuff. I'm just asking you not to over grip or over brace your abs during the day. Okay, so check for me right now. Is it squishy underneath your ribs? All right, are you busted? Are you holding tension underneath your ribs? So yeah, a lot of people do, and that tends to put pressure down on the pelvic floor. So when those external obliques come in as big bullies and they're like, oh, I can do everything, they tend to put pressure down on the pelvic floor. There was one study that showed that women who closed their diastasis faster postpartum had more prolapse. And so when we think about this as being a pressure system, if we get rid of all the escape of pressure to the front, it's going to go down. All right, and so this is really important to be mindful of. So what we want to do is work on decreasing upper ab gripping and increasing lower abdominal strength. And that really helps with women to leak. Now, when we talk about posterior or the back of the pelvic floor, when we talk about issues there, we want to really think about glute strength. And then after glute strength, deep hip rotator strength, and then adductor strength is so important, right? Because the adductors are like a continuation of our pelvic floor, and I often find them to be a nice reflection of what's going on in the middle. So we need this surrounding muscular system of support to be super, super strong. And that is the most amazing part, is how much we can help women, is how much we can help women in a training capacity, in Pilates and yoga, in exercise in general, and how much we can help women in the capacity of physical therapy. So it's really cool to think about the fact that we can affect the pelvic floor system through the rest of the system. And that, I love it. I love how much plays a role other than just pelvic floor strength. All right, so we're gonna dive into the second video. And in this video, we're gonna be looking at a couple of my favorite kinetic chain exercises. So I'm really excited to show those to you.